All right, so I think we're live. I'm here with Gamesquid or Florian, and we're going to have a very uh, laid back chat about atheism and belief, I suppose. So I'm forgive my audience because of the time zone and work requirements. We're sort of necessarily doing this for what amounts to me to be pretty early in the morning. So if I'm a little bit more laid back than I usually am, that's just going to have to be where it is. So I think what we were discussing initially was just I did a series on atheism, and I was really mainly to frame a video called "The Fatal Flaw" of new atheism, but it sort of devolved into a variety of different critiques, some of which were a little bit more snarky than others, including one broadly directed at the lack of belief atheism. And I think we were going to have a discussion with Florian. Do you want to introduce yourself for the audience?
Hello, I made a game called Binding of Isaac, and it's very much about satirizing religion. It's about the little boy Isaac who's going to be sacrificed, but then he fights his mother who's trying to sacrifice him. So it's very grotesque and very atheist. And that was a long time ago, and now I guess I'm somewhat open to the idea of religion being a good thing, but
I actually played the game. It's really good. I've seen lots of different interpretations of Binding of Isaac, not of all of which are anti-religious. I've seen some interpretations where people think it's like it's a dream it's a dream through which Isaac convinces himself to run away, and I don't know. It's something that I think. I really like indie games, so maybe we can talk about that a little bit. But in the meantime, I guess let's just get on to the atheism thing. Sorry, yeah. Again, I'm going to be a little bit spacey. Yeah, so maybe you could tell me about your own journey through interacting with religion or faith or atheism. That might be a good place to start.
Well, it started out with school, and school was very religious. Just normal school was already religious, but then I went to a private school that was run by a monastery that was even more religious. But then,
what country again? Perhaps is it the Czech Republic? Austria. Okay.
Yeah. You're somewhere from Germany as well. I heard at some point, but I might be wrong.
Well, my grandmother and my father was from basically Yugoslavia or Serbia, a former Austro-Hungarian. They would have associated themselves with the Austro-Hungarian Empire before its dissolution. They were in the region, but they were German speaking.
So do you speak any German? Not that I want to test it.
No. I took a few classes and I've lost it all. I haven't spoken it any, and I've even tried to do it in years. So please don't test me.
I do hate having to talk German with people who don't speak it. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's a harder language than you think. I mean, initially it seems a lot like English, and then you get into all of the grammar, and that's where it starts really becoming hard.
It's also very impractical. Everything is like twice as long than it needs to be.
I think it has its own kind of beauty to it. I mean, German, I don't know. I think it gets a bad rap because it sounds a little less graceful than the Romance languages. I don't know.
I'm not big on French either, but I do like the sound of Rammstein.
Oh yeah, it works
well. Part of German culture.
It works well. It works well for the metal, right?
Yep.
Anyway,
oh right.
Sorry, I interrupted. So please continue.
Well, I asked you. All right, so I shall stay on topic. Right. Well, I guess my mom was kind of never a believer, and she was a single mother, so she wasn't big on it. And my father was a a fugitive from Iraq, so
Hmm.
some people were thinking I was somewhat Muslim, but I was never. So I just went to school, but I was never big into any religion. And then I never really liked it because going to church was very boring to me as a child. And well, I haven't gone to church since, I guess, since I've graduated from that school.
No, no, that's understandable. It's I think religion in the modern age is very hard. I mean, I had some early experiences with religion in my own life, and sort of found my way into atheism, and then sort of found my way back to religion through philosophy. It's a very unusual path because I think a lot of people, even if they sort of tackle the philosophy of theology, they usually end up in something a little bit more like the Jordan Peterson type deism. And I think I really made the step of sort of taking the full jump back into Catholicism. But I found that
You're,
in
you're
some
not
ways, what? Yeah.
you're not fully into Catholicism yet.
No, no, I'm fully into Catholicism. I went all
Right.
the way back. I went all the way back. I didn't do. I think a lot of people in my position probably would have, like I said, sort of gone the Jordan Peterson route, where you're a deist, or you're sort of a vague theist, in a sense. But I felt that the full tradition of Catholicism was sort of, well, I was convinced by arguments, but at the same time, the arguments were supported by emotions that sort of they're supported by a feeling that Catholicism sort of had a perspective on the universe that was unique and didn't really make sense to tear up into pieces. If that makes sense, it didn't make sense to take it on piecemeal.
Well, that may be true, but don't you think that it falls apart part by part because it used to have way more rules and now it's just becoming more and more liberal as well.
Well, that's the thing. I think that well, what the Catholic Church has done is it's pared itself back to the absolute necessities, which I think is a big problem. It said, well, do you have to do X? If you don't have to do X, then maybe it's all right if you don't do X. But I think that's been sort of a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. People kind of want rules; they want structure in their life.
Well, I guess it's like achievements. They want to achieve all the rules, but there is no real rewards for it. It's just like moral high ground, maybe.
Well, they want. Well, I mean, I guess no, I shouldn't speak for other religions, but I think that in the sense that it looks to me as though the Orthodox religions and Catholicism, for all of its deviations in the mainstream, is still thoroughly an Orthodox religion when you catch it in its pure form. These religions are the ones that are going to survive because they have a certain internal coherency to them.
Well, they're certainly a big part of culture around here. There's a lot of churches, and everyone's very Catholic.
Really,
Catholic?
I guess in
Yeah,
Austria is more conservative, isn't
we're
it?
very close to Italy after all. It would only make sense.
Hold on a minute.
Well, at least in this region, I think there might be other branches of Christianity, but not right here in Tyrol.
Well, so you're in what part of Austria? You're in like
Tyrol, Innsbruck
Tyrol.
is
Okay.
the capital that I live in. Well,
Yeah,
there are some Jehovah Witnesses and different Baptists, even. No, I'm not sure. I don't know what they translate to, but there's all
that's funny. I mean,
kinds.
Austria was it's one of the sort of traditional seats of Catholicism. And it's a very classically Catholic country. So I'm sort of encouraged that there's some preservation of the tradition in that country. I guess some people, I think we're going to be faced with. Now I know I've made this case before, and I'll just remake it again. Now I think there's a lot of arguments for religion. There's a lot of arguments for the specific reasons to believe that Jesus was the Messiah. There's a lot of really strong logical arguments about why God has to exist, or why something like God or indistinguishable from God has to exist. But I think, putting those aside, now I think they're very important. I think they've all been made by people like William Lane Craig. And so what I'm just kind of trying to grapple with is what it means to be European and secular, or what it means to be Western and secular. And I think that question is something that no one really has a good answer for, because we're sort of, the problem with the modern world in its secular form is it seems to be sort of embracing an absence of something.
Well, to me, it seems that most people are basically not that strong believers. They're basically just indulging the church. I don't see them. Well, at least my circle of friends is very atheist. But I guess that's what happens if you make the Binding of Isaac. Even
Well,
though we have
that's one portion too. Most Catholics, a lot of Catholics, I should say, are very lapsed.
Yeah, you find a big problem with the fact that they don't pray as hard or believe as hard as you think they should.
Yeah, and you also have people. I mean, this is sort of a big problem with, I don't know, what people like myself would call modernity. Is that you have these institutions that used to sort of make up the fabric of people's lives. They in the present world, they're diminished because people have outlets that are immediately more appealing, like video games and YouTube and all these distractions, right? And so we tend to undervalue sort of the things that that aren't sort of immediately appealing, I guess, and that's sort of a cultural problem.
Well, this it sometimes feels like you're not that big in favor of games because you think that they're just a distraction and they couldn't be art, or, well, I mean, I don't know about that, but it seems like you'd want people to move away from games and into religion as if it was a binary choice. And
I don't think it's a binary choice. I mean, frankly, I've been accused of by other religious people of not putting enough emphasis on the capital R religious aspect of this channel. I guess my criticism of video games, and I'm positive on some of them. I really like Binding of Isaac. I really like the art house ones. Is I'm not so sure we figured out exactly how to incorporate video games into, if there's a movie that comes out, right? It becomes sort of a cultural artifact and we can use it to discuss ideas. It's much more hard to do that with video games, right? It's not, and maybe it's just we haven't developed it yet. But in my experience playing video games, and I've really cut back. I hardly ever play video games anymore. In my experience, it sort of becomes less an ability to interact with a perspective of the world, and it becomes sort of an alternative world for the player. And that's sort of that's sort of the thing that I struggle with, right?
so if you have like a social group of people that play games together, is that better than like a clan in a game? If it's only online, I guess that's worse.
No, I guess I'm not trying to like structure a moral system to judge gamers. I'm just saying it causes some I'm just saying, like, gaming culture as it exists currently causes some problems.
Oh, so it does cause problems. See, it does seem like that's your view, but it seems like I almost wouldn't want that to be your your view. But I guess so. So it's just that it distracts people from the real world. That's the main problem. But
Well,
doesn't religion also distract people from the real world?
no, and like you could say all art is like all when you read a book, when I read War and Peace, like I'm being distracted from the real world. When I watch a movie, I'm being distracted from the real world, right? I don't it's not that basic, right? I'm not saying, and I don't really, like I said before, I've played video games, and some video games I consider to be really, really good. I just, my issue is, it's not, it's not the fact that video games have this role. It's sort of where they are right now as a cultural form, and where they are as a cultural form right now is, it's very hard to put them in a box, right? They're becoming very, very abused, right? I mean, a great example of this is like the Japanese culture around video games is really pathological. You've got like people just like living inside the virtual reality, and that's sort of what I'm afraid of. And I think there's a lot of potential. No, I have a board game weakness myself, right? That's not really the issue. So I understand that video games are just another art form. I just think that they need to take the next step. They need to start thinking about how does a video game communicate a deep concept, right?
So you want them to be less absorbing, but they still should put forward ideas. How interesting.
Well, that's the problem, right? I mean, a less absorbing video game is not going to do well in the market, but
Indeed.
yeah. But
well, it's probably less a critique of the game, but the gamers that get absorbed in it. Maybe if they played healthy doses, that would be more to your liking.
No, yeah. If it's in healthy doses, then there's no problem with video games. Nothing about video games themselves are is has a problem. And it's not like this is a big topic of my channel either. It's just something that I notice a lot in nerd culture too. That there's a reason why I feel like there's an enormous amount of contempt that a lot of mainstream nerd like comics, video games, sci-fi movies, there's a large amount of contempt that the producers have for their audience. The only thing I'd say, it's really hard to. The only other art form I can think of where that kind of contempt exists is maybe pornography. I mean, it's just like there's a sense that like, oh well, we'll just make this highly addictive product, and there's like I said, art house games are an exception, but it seems that they're like, well, there's less an attempt to actually facilitate a healthy community of consumers and more attempt to just milk that community as hard as possible with fan service.
Well, I guess it's hard to think about these things because if you make a movie, you can't really milk your audience very much because they're probably not gonna see it more than once. So getting them addicted to it, if you make one per year, even it wouldn't be unreasonable because there's only a limited amount of content that you can put out. But in a game, there's basically way more content because it's randomized and it reuses assets because the movement is the same in one level as in the other level. So all they've got to do is make more levels. Well, in a movie, you got to reshoot everything from angles, and it's insane amounts of work, I'm sure.
And there's been like the last video game I played was BioShock Infinite. And I saw that game and I'm like, this game would have actually made a better movie in a lot of regards.
Yeah, it was very cinematic and I didn't like it as a game. Actually,
no, it wasn't a good game. The gaming took away from the story.
Indeed.
Someone dropped an FPS in my movie about, this redemption story arc inside of a steampunk universe.
Yeah, and it takes away from the game if you have these cutscenes that take too much time and they're too gimmicky with the choices that you have to make. I actually watched your video about BioShock, the original one. I never even considered that it was a social critique of any sort, but I guess now I played it again because of that, and it was very interesting.
That's kind of funny. I was gonna actually make a video, like a longer cut video on BioShock,
I
Once
hope
my
you do.
fiance, yeah, I'll get to it. It really does kind of cut into the libertarian worldview. I just haven't had time to do it yet.
Well, it's easy to criticize something in a game because, I mean, you don't really see how it went wrong. I mean, libertarian world, it went all right, but then, oh no, they've discovered magical addicting drugs that can make you spit fire, and that's how it all went wrong.
Well, here's the thing. The reason why critiques work is as if the mechanism, like in a movie or game, represents something that occurs in the real world, right? And of course, we don't have X-Men drugs that make people Supermen, but the question is, in sort of the objectivist sense, what is the responsibility of people who are naturally talented, not just to squash the people beneath them? And if that incentive were ever there to do that, as it was in Bioshock, what would a society look like that had no altruistic side to itself?
I guess that's a very interesting point. Well, normally, well, we got kind of the opposite because teamwork is usually greatly rewarded, but then you've got taxes that say you gotta pay for everything because you've made money. You gotta pay for all the poor.
Well, I mean,
I see the
yeah, good.
libertarian point of view very well, but I still have to really find the problems with it. But of course, it's not like it's around the corner that it'll become libertarian. The world.
Well, the world will never become libertarian.
I assume so.
Yeah, there's no way, and we're headed for a lot more state intervention because after we're essentially going to, I think Western countries are going to be faced with huge challenges to their sovereignty via large scale migration, and they're going to have to find some way of reasserting their identities and becoming more than what they are currently, or they're going to become extensions of a global wealth redistribution scheme. That is something that I think a lot of people in the finance industry want them to be. That's the role that people in the World Bank want them to play.
So you're actually afraid of overtaking of socialism becoming so big that it'll consume everything.
Well, it depends
Is
what you
that
mean by.
right?
Oh, pardon me. It depends what you mean by socialism. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, I just mean the welfare state, basically, in this case.
Yeah, the welfare state is going to grow. I mean, the problem is, like I said before, there's really no more money to fund new entitlement programs. This is sort of the great irony: is that everyone wants these entitlement programs to grow, but we're already so much in debt that we can't really get more entitlement programs unless we just debase the currency.
Well, and then you don't have much either, I guess, because then the money's less valuable.
Well, the middle class people who save for the future don't have very much in that case.
Well, the rich people as well, they'll lose money too.
No, they actually won't because the rich people are hedged.
Hedged.
Yeah, they are. So the rich people buy up assets. So if for instance,
see, I see. Yeah,
for
well, I guess
instance, for
can you
instance,
buy
if,
assets when you're in the middle class as a savings, or does it have to be money?
well, the thing is that in the middle class you have to buy something that's a low risk
Well, I guess you could always
asset,
buy
right? So you can buy
real
land,
estate.
real estate, which is increasingly expensive and hard to get into. But for the most part, your money sits on money markets. It sits in education. It sits in wages, right? And if you're making most of your wealth off of wages, and there's a huge inflation, you're the one that gets screwed over. I know my grandparents used to talk about this a lot, and I'm sure. Well, I don't know about yours, but same general region. The German inflation of the 1920s and early 30s.
Oh, I've heard stories about that one, but well,
Yeah.
not from my grandparents directly. It was always like a friend of the family who apparently lost a lot of money.
Who do you think that screwed over the most? The rich, the poor, the middle class?
I guess you got a point
It's the middle
about the middle
class. The
class.
middle class got screwed over, and they're the ones that supported the fascist economic the fascists because the poor didn't have any money to lose, And the rich could always buy high-risk assets to essentially hedge themselves against the currency collapsing. It was the middle class that had most of their wealth in money. And when the middle class took the hit, they really had no recourse.
So, so it is then, after all, that you see the socialism to be the greatest problem right now, or is that wrong?
I think it's a symptom of larger problems.
Well, let's see what those are.
I think the larger problems is we can't admit that. I mean, we've sort of been running the world on this simplified model of humanity, and I don't think it's true. I think humans have to be. They have to have a relationship to meaning, and they have to have a relationship with a larger family structure, and and that's what gives them meaning. And I think we've been sort of organizing the world on the pretense that human beings are these economic entities that work and pay taxes and consume products, and we haven't put any thought into how are we going to invest for the future. We haven't put into any thought into how we're going to preserve our culture. And because of this, we've had to come up with all these stupid ideas to convince ourselves the system will work, like the stupid idea that all cultures are going to behave the exact same way. And I think we're seeing, like in Sweden, that all cultures don't behave the exact same way.
Oh no, not about the immigrants. Well, let's see. Well, I guess the family really would work as a privatized welfare system rather than a statewide one, and I guess that would it decrease welfare spending? I guess that's a good point. But I don't know about the fear of immigrants. I mean, we hear a lot of terrible things about the immigrants from the right wings, and we hear a lot of, well, I mean, I hear some arguments about why these. I've heard these things debunked before as well. So I take these things with lots of salt. I wouldn't want to buy into
Mm.
any kind of group mentality here. I don't know how bad the immigrants can really be. Are they going to advocate for Sharia law? I don't know if that's the case, because they moved away from the countries where they had more of that religion. So I'm not sure if they're gonna bring a lot of it with them. And even then, the children, they still grow up here, so there's still a chance for them that they would abandon these these cultures that you don't seem to like.
I
So
don't dislike. I mean, this is not my country, so it's not really my
I
place to
didn't.
say.
I guess it's not the right word. You just think that they might be harmful.
Well, I think if you want a Sweden that looks like a Sweden of the 1990s, then changing the population from one culture to the other is not going to give you that a Sweden that looks like the Sweden from the 90s.
Well, things do always change, and it couldn't possibly look like that anymore, because now there's computers, and now everyone is online most of the time, and they can just look up whatever they need. And I don't know if culture would have remained important without these immigrants, or if
No, I understand you can never step into the same river twice, right? I understand that there's a natural sort of entropic flow, but I'm talking about if you do a population change, you will have a radical cultural shift. And I don't think people are prepared for the kind of radical cultural shift that is going to overtake them. European countries have been really bad at assimilating these immigrants, and immigrants don't naturally assimilate. This is something that I think they assume that the United States did it all right, and therefore it would be easy. But it's not an easy thing to do. And it's especially not an easy thing to do when you move immigrants in these contiguous flocks like they are doing currently.
so. Is your worry mostly about Europe then, or is it also about America? Is there any immigrants that go to America that you fear that they will overtake the culture?
My worry is not immigration really. Like I said, that immigration and socialism, these are or not socialism, welfare statism. These are all just symptoms, right? These are all just effects that are coming up in the modern world. The cause is moving away from essentially objective concepts of meaning, truth, beauty. And you know, you could another symptom would be like poor modern art, right? I mean, like the most famous artwork we've had in the last, or the two most famous artworks we've had in the last 20 years have been a guy who put shark in formaldehyde and a condom-strewn bed. I mean, and that's like the most notable art I can think of in the last 30 years.
Well, that's not very charitable for art. I mean,
Well, I mean,
you have in that case, I guess you specify art as being things that you put in a gallery, but why would you stop there? You got movies, you got games. These things are art. I think these are our greatest pieces of art yet.
well,
And
sure,
they never existed before. Now they exist. And why would you put a painting in a room or a gallery when you could put it on the internet where you could expose it to millions of people? The only reason why you would want to put it in a room is because you can't stand up to the competition of the World Wide Web.
but the thing is this sort of gets to my thing. The gallery, and and we still have galleries, by the way. There's no lack of galleries if you go to downtown Seattle. The gallery is a space where the society as a whole calls out whatever images on the internet or whatever thing is put into games. I mean, there's always been popular art, right? You know, there was popular art during Van Gogh's time. There was popular art during the pre-Raphaelites time. So the video games and movies and stuff, that's not new, right? It's not a replacement. But the gallery was supposed to be a sacred place where society got together and said, "This is beautiful. This is what society is holding up as the standard of beauty in our attempt to get at meaning." And if you go look at modern art in this regard, I see a society framing not so much a concept of meaning, but a deep confusion about, or a deep skepticism that meaning even exists.
Well, it is definitely in the nature of art to subvert expectations and to just satirize what people want. But I don't know about games not being. So is it high art then that you've got opposed to popular art?
Yeah, I mean, I know this is sort of a pretentious category, but it is sort of high art that is, you're seeing the problem emerge in. I think that popular art has sort of a standardization that comes from the fact that people have to buy it. That makes it kind of so that makes it kind of hard to deviate from standard models of what people find stimulating. But to answer your question, I think America has less immigration problems. It's still going to have a lesser culture shift that comes from changing the population, but it will occur nonetheless.
All right, so I guess it would be time that we focus in more on religion again. So you've had these art galleries as well that are a very social thing, and I'm assuming that your great benefit of religion would be that you have your local congregation and it's a very tight knit community. Is that right?
Well, it yeah, I mean, the benefit of religion is, in my opinion, that it's true. But in addition to that, and sort of more pertinent to our conversation, a religious community is a collective community that believes in truth, goodness, and beauty. And they don't believe in your own truth or your own beauty or your own goodness. They believe in the truth, the beautiful, the good, right? And this is sort of a problem, is that all the other ways we have of interacting with these concepts in the marketplace just assure people that whatever they think is has these qualities is what has these qualities, and they sort of become the entity that bestows these qualities on objects.
So you've basically got the truth, but so basically the truth is just is God. Is that right? Is the belief in God the main thing, or is that just a part of it?
Well, I mean, I guess it is the main thing. I mean, I mean, I don't know where you're going with that, but it certainly is. That's sort of the first step, presumably, to getting larger wisdom out of the system that you're examining.
Well, I hope I'm not being too aggressive here, but
Yeah,
uh,
go for
to
it.
to me it feels this is supposed to be a friendly conversation, but I don't know if
Yeah,
this is
go for it. I don't. It's fine. Don't worry.
well. Basically, you got the Ten Commandments, and it says you
Mhm.
shall not lie, and you shall not be greedy, or something in the sort. But then you go to the church, and it's made of gold and
Mhm.
beautiful statues and everything. And they ask you for money so they can maintain the church, and then they tell you about God, even though they've only heard from it. They've only read about God or heard from it through other people, and then they elevate it to this idea that is beyond everything, and it's just
Most people who are religious priests of one sort or another have personal religious experiences. So it's not purely hypothetical.
oh wow, they really have talked to God, huh?
Not talk to God. That's not exactly how religious experience works. Religious experience works with the impression that, you know, through some moment in your life, you sort of punctured through the reality as we sort of experience it, to borrow a Matrix analogy, and you feel like suddenly your mind's come in contact with a greater reality that's pointing you in a certain direction. Now, this can be some incredible experience with beauty. It can be a moment of humility. It can be a moment of redemption, but you feel that sort of you're humbled in the space of a much, much larger truth that you're only experiencing a small portion of. And that is what religious people mean when they say God in a direct sense. Now, sometimes people feel like they can have conversations. Some people, but that's not what religious experiences manifest themselves as always. And this is something that, you know, I don't think it's necessarily fair to say religious believers don't have direct experience with what they believe is the divine, or what I believe is the divine.
But in that case, you said it's a greater truth, and you don't see lots. You only see a glimpse of that greater truth, and it's very hard to tell if that has anything to do with Christianity, even though it may seem to you as if it was very Christian, or maybe it wasn't even. Maybe it was just that there is more, and then you think, yep, these guys are selling more. I'll buy into that.
Well, in some sense, you're like the emotion that oftentimes comes to religious believers, if they don't have any, if it's a vaguer religious experience, is people will say something along the lines of, "Well, I experienced this, and certainly my ancestors must have experienced something like this. I wonder what my ancestors thought about how this mysterious force that exists behind the material universe operates." And then they start reading about, um, they start reading in what their ancestors have handed down to them in terms of religious books, and that sort of sociologically is how the journey begins.
So you need both inheritance as well as an actual experience to become a true believer. Inherited faith, inherited experiences.
Religion sociologically is an inherited object, but so are many other human beliefs. And this is sort of, I mean, the analogy to science isn't totally wrong. I mean, how when we look at science, I mean, most of the things that we learn from science are not things that we've directly observed. There are things that were done under controlled experiments by people who'd come before us, who had more opportunity to understand those things, and then they were taught to us, and we were assured by the authority of the people who learned them that they were correct.
Well, I was taught science in the same school, and I was taught about having to go to church every once a month. I guess that's how. I guess it wasn't as bad as some other schools, but they did make us go to church once a month. So I guess one of them stuck to me and the other one didn't. But I guess my mother wasn't religious at the time, so maybe I didn't inherit it from her.
Well, no, children usually inherit religion from peer groups, and this is this is one of the reasons why. Well, I mean, to circle it back, the way we've been teaching people religion in schools where you go to church once a month, which is really infrequent.
Well, we did have
It's not
education.
effective, and it's also, I mean, it's kind of funny that we stumbled upon this, but the same reason why you didn't absorb religion is the same reason why the migrants to Europe are not going to actually assimilate into European culture.
Well, we did have.
Superimposing this bureaucratic notion of a heritage is not going to actually give people heritage.
Well, I guess if you look at it that way, I never even considered that religion would be such an inherited thing. But you said you were moved away from religion, and you still had very religious parents and grandparents then.
Nope, did not have religious parents.
So how did you inherit it?
I know I didn't inherit it really. I just I had some exposure to it because I had some time in a religious school for several years, but it was mainly the religion I have now is mainly the product of intellectual exploration. I'm an intellectual convert to the faith. Some people call them intellectual converts. I think that's really pretentious, but I don't know. I did not have this handed to me. I mean, religion. When we say religion, like in a sociological sense, it's characterized by the fact that it's transmitted um, uh, by heritage. So, for instance, Confucianism is a religion because it's handed down, even though people might think that isn't a religion because there's no God and it's mainly just a political philosophy.
Well, I never learned much about Confucianism, so it's.
It's a little like he's a little bit like Aristotle.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I got a lot of ignorances here. For example,
No,
the
no problem.
the
It's
the big the big names about. Well, you dropped some names earlier about people who were religious or people who were atheists, and I didn't know about them either. Anyways,
No, that's fine. We're just exploring, like I said, it's casual conversation. So we're just kind of like, I think what a lot of people on the dissident right like me believe is that
is that the far right or the near center right?
the dissident right is, I would say, people probably call it far right. Uh, it's just people who aren't
Oh,
enfranchised by modern political parties, right? I don't know what these names mean. Far When I say distant right, I mean I'm right wing, and there aren't any politicians that adequately express the kind of thing that I want. So I'm distant. I'm on the outside. I'm going like I have these ideas, and I don't have anyone that's really expressing them right now.
but distributism is kind of socialism. You said
Yeah.
so. Wouldn't that make you closer to the left?
Well, not really, because I mean, distributism is it's redistribution to families. It's property rights that are focused on. I mean, in many ways, distributism is attempting to do the opposite of what the German hyperinflation did in the 1930s. German hyperinflation in the 1930s robbed the middle class. Distributism wants to enrich the middle class, and it wants to refocus the society and societal organization on the family and the church, and that puts it at odds with socialism because socialism wants to. Well, I mean, I don't know if it wants to do this, and perhaps it's not fair to say it wants to do this, but in my mind, what it sort of creates is a society that's hollowed out, that exists with no layers in between the individual and the state that's writing that individual a check.
So basically, the difference is that you want to give money to the middle class and the lower class, I would assume. So the 1% have to pay for everything now, or do
Well,
the lower class also have to pay?
I think it's less about giving money than it is about creating rules that would benefit those people.
And it doesn't have to do with money.
Well, I mean, it does in an ultimate sense, right? But it's not like just, oh, hey, middle class family here, just take this check and cash it. I think it's more like making sure we don't have runaway inflation, making sure that there's an incentive to save rather than spend, make sure that consumer products get taxed and things like schools and houses remain relatively cheap. I mean, a lot of the big problem we have in this country, and I'm not going to speak for countries I don't know very much about, one of the main problems we have is that, or this generation has, is that consumer products are so cheap. It's really easy to go out and buy an iPhone. It's really easy to go out and buy a computer. And I love all of these consumer objects. But at the end of the day, what has got, well, as these consumer products have gotten cheaper, the cost of housing has gotten more expensive, the cost of transportation has gotten more expensive, and the cost of schooling has gotten more expensive. And housing, transportation, and schooling are much more important to be cheap if you want people to have families that they support.
Oh, is that so? Because wouldn't it be easier to have a family home if the housing is expensive? Because then it would make sense to not have a lot of different apartments for a lot of different people.
Well, what do you mean? If housing is expensive, you can't buy a house to put your children in.
But you can't afford to live alone either.
No, you can because I mean, I'm going to get married, but I used to live in like a shoebox. Like in Seattle, you can find these apartments which is just like a bed and like a bathroom and there's like a stove and you live in this little box and that's all you really need.
I guess they do take a little bit more space, but is it really more compared to
And
having everyone in individual
and
houses?
that's not the big problem too, because in this country, and I assure you, coming soon to your Europe, the big problem is going to be schools. Because if your house is in the middle of an area that has a bad school, your kids are going to be going to bad, dangerous schools.
I don't know about the crime here. I don't think it's as bad as people think, but I don't even think it's as bad in America or anything. I
No,
think it's
America
all
is
just blown out of
America.
proportion. Sorry,
Well,
go
the
on.
crime. I mean, the crime is a slightly different problem than education, certainly, but the crime is just indicative of poor educational environments. Inner city schools,
Oh,
people don't like
the
them
vicious
because
cycle. That makes
well,
sense.
the inner city schools like they're really bad schools. Your child's not going to get a good education there, and it mainly, if you look at the numbers, I believe there's a good case that there to be made that is largely has the fact to do with the fact that with the large number of undisciplined children that don't have any structure in their lives. And so the same there's the similar cause behind crime rates and poor schools. But if you're in America, you need to buy a house that is in some area that has good schools, or you're going to be paying additionally to go to a private school. And that now you have a house and private school, and then you also have to transport yourself to your work, which is very expensive, and pretty soon your entire Silicon Valley paycheck is eaten is consumed in giving in paying those three things. Okay, maybe you have a cheap iPhone, but who cares, right?
So I guess your solution would be then to localize the market and make it so you can't import cheap iPhones, and that way people will make more money because they gotta make their own iPhones, and then they can afford
No,
the
I, I,
housing.
I don't think it. I don't think that it. I know I'm setting it up like it's a contrast, but I don't believe that somehow magically by making iPhones more expensive, uh, it will suddenly magically make education and housing cheaper. I think that's probably not going to happen. There's a number of
Well, the
policies that
point would be that all the cheap imports would then be stopped by your policy to enclose the borders, I guess. And then only the things that are in the country will be able to be sold, and then everything balances out around what people need and what they can make for themselves and for
Well, I mean,
others.
that's an interesting economic theory that's not quite in line with how I think things would work. But I have my own
Well,
pet
I don't
policies.
think it would work, but I'm thinking that would be one of the solutions to what you're.
Well,
I
I
mean,
just told you I didn't think it would work, so
like,
probably can't be one of my solutions, right? It
well,
wouldn't work because it postulates that. I mean,
well,
there's a
how else
common.
could you make the things more expensive unless you tax them?
I don't want to make no. I don't want to make things products more expensive. I want to make housing and education and transportation cheaper.
Well,
I mean, I'll give you an example of a policy, right? That could be accomplished in current law, and that would make iPhones more expensive. And okay, how about zoning out tech companies so they couldn't all build in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area in California, and had to set up shop in like Topeka and Kansas City and Helena and all of these places in the middle of the country. It would
well, that,
instantly fix a lot of the problems, right? It would alleviate the housing crisis in inside Silicon Valley. It would essentially force people to move to different areas of the country, and therefore uh, it would sort of take down barriers in between Red America and Blue America. It would enrich some of these what people in my area call flyover country states, and it would create communities of smart individuals that have low housing prices and a good opportunity to get into schools. The reason why we don't do that, well, it would hurt Silicon Valley's bottom line, and it would hurt it very
it,
significantly.
it would be very tyrannical as well. Can't just
Why?
move.
We already zone companies. You don't think you
You
zone
do.
companies in Austria? Yeah. You don't think you zone companies in Austria? You think you can build a you think you can move into downtown Vienna and build a tire plant? Probably not.
We can tell them where not to build, but you can't tell them to build somewhere
Yeah,
else.
I'm telling them you can't build in Silicon Valley anymore without this huge tax.
Oh, and so this tax pays for all the things the Rust Belt needs then.
No, it doesn't. No, it forces the companies to build in the Rust Belt in order to set up shop, which
Or in
diversifies.
China.
Or in China. I mean, I don't think so though. I don't think they want to build in China. I think that would even be more expensive for them. I think it forces them not to all build in one location. So have you ever heard of like game theory?
I guess.
Okay, so there's this thing like, okay, so let's say we have a town, right? We've got 4 gas stations, right? And the town's got like a highway on ramp and off ramp. And you should ask yourself, well, where should we put the gas stations in order to be optimal for people who live in the town? Probably distributed around the town, right?
Well, I'm assuming not. Sounds
Well,
like a
that would
rhetorical
be the
question.
optimal. Well, that would be the optimal way to do it, right? But in reality, people don't do that. They all build near the highway, right? And individually, if we were to say the health of the system overall would be, we would want to distribute it. But the thing is that each of the individual gas station owners is going like, well, if I don't build next to the highway, which is the best place, they'll build next to the highway. Therefore, I better build next to the highway because I don't want to be the one that gets that loses on this interaction. And so they all make greedy decisions, and the town ends up worse off. And that's essentially what's happened with Silicon Valley.
I guess that's one way of looking at it, but it seems to be working out for them.
No, it is working out for. I mean, it's working out for Mark Zuckerberg. That's for sure. I just don't know if we should really run our society so that Mark Zuckerberg can be rich and powerful.
So it is about taxing the 1% after all. I knew it.
Well, no, not taxing exactly, but if we want to say that, fine.
Well, you said taxing them so they move somewhere else.
Yeah, but it's not like a tax and spend scheme. It's sort of re-incentivizing the system.
Well, I guess that's different names for it, but all right. I guess we should talk more about religion then, or
Sure.
or was there more? Let's see. Do I have to
No,
reshoot
it's
this? I guess
no, it's
I'm not that well known about American politics. I don't know if distributism would work in any if in any way, or if it's
oh no, it's right now it's a defunct. It's defunct. Right now, it's just it's an 80-year-old economic theory, and no one's
all
ever
right.
explained how. I'm just taking concepts from an old system and seeing how they apply if we apply those solutions to the modern world. I just got to chat. I wish the distributists didn't buy into the bad school myth. Well, there are schools that people in this country will avoid, like the Black Death. So we can call them whatever we want to call them, but people will buy, they'll spend millions of dollars on houses to avoid those schools. So I don't know what we'd like to call them.
Well, I started off in a worse school, and then I went to a slightly better school, and it wasn't that different, but I guess it was a little different. So I guess you may have a point, but I think the schools should be one of the easiest things to improve, because
It
that's something the
hasn't been.
government pays for, right? I guess
It hasn't
depends.
been in this country.
How is it paid for locally?
It's paid for locally and through the state, with some funding coming from the government. But the thing is that we have not seen government funding really improve schools. We've increased the funding of schools, and it hasn't really done anything to improve performance.
Well, I guess it is a very old system, this distributism, just like religion. What is it? An old system too.
Distributism is not an old system like religion.
Not
Distributism
that
was
old.
no, it comes from the early 20th century. It was invented in the early 20th century. It's newer than Marxism,
Oh,
way newer than Marxism. So it's just basically a kooky idea from the early 20th century.
I shouldn't go on too much about it then, I guess.
I just got an update. Bad school myth equals the idea that it's not the quality of the students that is the prime factor in its success. Well, uh, I did say that it was the quality of the students. I said that students from broken families essentially derive the problems in the schools, and it's really a family problem. So I guess I don't buy into the bad school myth.
Well, anyways, I'm thinking that one thing about religion is that they always try to sell you salvation, and you do it in the same way, because you say that things are going to fall down and the West is declining, and the way is to go back to religion to save them. But it doesn't make that much sense, because it seems that you should be believing in an afterlife, so you wouldn't be too worried about the here and now, and you are very pessimistic. But you have said that you're trying to improve on that.
No, I'm
So
not. I'm not so sure. You're saying that religious people shouldn't care about the future of their societies. I don't. I don't see how that follows. I suppose.
well,
I mean, I certainly
I'm
care a
just
lot about.
saying that they should be hopeful, and they should believe that people can do good. I think that would be a point of Christianity,
Oh
that
yeah.
there is goodness.
Well, there's goodness certainly, but people usually do evil.
And I guess so. The intelligent design of God, does that not also include the society that has been created? Is that society on the verge of the decline if we don't intervene?
Society is always on the decline unless people take care and
Always.
think about the future.
Well, surely society has gotten larger and more productive over the past very severely.
Technology has.
Hmm. I guess you.
I guess I'm not talking. I see society and technology as two different things.
Hmm. So, well, what about economy? Is that part of society, or is that part of technology?
Well, more or less a product of both of them. I'd say our economy is driven by technology. I mean, I don't see why. Serious, I guess I don't understand what your point is. Your point is things are getting better, and and we should believe in this progress uh, if we believe in God or something. I guess I didn't. Maybe I missed the point.
Well, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how religion really works. But if you did believe in God, then surely you would be hopeful.
For the hereafter or for the course of our society.
Well, in general,
Well,
uh,
that's not even historically. That's not how it worked, right? I mean, people like Augustine were highly pessimistic about the state of their society, even though they were optimistic about the hereafter. Augustine was the well, he was the famous writer from North Africa in the fifth century, City of God.
I heard there was a movie.
Oh no, no, that was about Brazil, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, I mean, I don't put my faith in society. Like I, that's sort of the opposite. I feel that
But
in a lot of ways.
well, actually, doesn't Jesus preach that you should turn the other cheek? So
Sure,
this whole pessimism thing, I don't see how that works out with all the teachings of Jesus Christ.
I don't think Jesus said. Well, I guess I don't see what turn the other cheek has to do with being optimistic
Well,
about
I
the
guess
course of
just the
society. By the way, when I say I want to be optimistic, but I want to be optimistic about what we can do to improve our society. I don't want to convince myself that where the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Warren Buffetts of the world are taking us is a good direction, because I think it's not.
well, I guess I guess you could see it that way. I'm just thinking that there's always been this improvement. I mean, I guess you don't buy into the idea that there's always been this progress, but I think even
No,
if
I buy that
if
there's always been technological progress.
if the society declines, it would still be easy to have a new society right away with about the same technology, just slightly different culture, maybe. So I wouldn't be too worried about it altogether. But
Well, I mean,
I
uh,
guess if you're involved in the culture so much that you wanted to survive, I guess it makes sense.
well, I think most people do want their culture to survive, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, but what really is the culture? And my culture is on the internet mostly. I I, I just want games and movies to continue, and I want there to not be any violence, and that's the extent of the culture I need to survive.
Games and movies won't raise a new generation of children.
Yeah, that's another point you have about the decline in birth rate. So, how big of a problem is that people are having less children now?
A lot if you want your entitlements to be paid back in 20 years.
Well, that is true, but immigrants will still have to pay for welfare after they've. I mean, there will always be
And
people in
that's
the country.
there's an assumption that the productivity of the immigrants is going to mirror the productivity of the native population. So far, I don't think that's been true.
Well, there's also the assumption that productivity is going to remain the same, but I think what really is going to happen is that there's going to be less and less jobs because of automation. So I'm not even sure we can sustain the same level of population having good jobs. So having lower skilled immigrants in the country wouldn't be terribly unproductive.
Well, if it's automation, then having lower skilled immigrants in the country would be a terrible liability because they're going to be energetic and pissed off and looking for someone to take out that anger on.
Oh no, you're right.
So, probably not such a good idea, right?
Guess not. I guess it is all. It's all very terrible.
I wonder why the European leadership is doing it.
Well, I think individual states have tried to pull it back, but I don't even think there's that many of them here, and who knows if they're gonna stay for good. At least
I would
the
say
few.
that you would have to. I would say you'd have to not. You'd have to have a very loose concept of pattern recognition to think that the mainstay of the immigration is going to flow back to the Middle East.
Well, not the main, but well, it's not
Well,
like
if not the main, then what?
well, if the
I'm sure a few
fugitives,
people are going
I'm
to go
not
there.
sure. Fugitives, now what's the word? People who flee from
Refugees.
that's the one, yeah. If they're refugees, I don't think they're legally allowed to stay after the country has gone back to peace.
I don't think many of them are refugees. I think most of them are migrants.
Well, that is true. Some of them will definitely be migrants. Well, I guess I may be just too optimistic.
No, I think there's a reason for optimism. I just think that we put our faith in the wrong things. Technology will improve, but it's not what the problem is right now. The problem is the fact that people think that cultures are interchangeable, that you can take one culture and plop it down in a different culture and then have the same result. How could this even possibly be true? Like if I took the population of Japan, right?
Yep.
And I plopped it down in, I take the population of Japan and the population of like Zambia, right? Like country in Southern Africa. And we took all the people in Zambia and we put them in Japan. We took all the people in Japan and put them in Zambia. And we came back in 15 years. What country would look more like Japan? The country, the physical land of Zambia, which is now populated by Japanese people, or the physical land of Japan, which is now populated by Zambians?
Well, I would actually think that they would both look kind of somewhat like Japan, because
Really?
well, the houses are still going to be there, and all the technology is still there.
But the culture wouldn't be there. The Zambians would continue the same behavioral patterns they had in Zambia with nicer houses.
But wouldn't that be a huge improvement for them?
It would be, but would it sustain?
Well, all the knowledge is there except for, well, I guess it depends. Can they read Japanese? Can they learn to read Japanese? Who knows?
Well, it's not going to learn to read Japanese. Japanese society works the way it does because of how people behave collectively, and the Zambians wouldn't have that way of collective behavior because it wouldn't have been culturally instilled. So, and the Japanese who moved to Zambia would. So my expectation would be that if you moved a bunch of Zambians into Japan, things would look a lot more like a city in Zambia than they would look like in present-day Japan after 15 years of that population transfer.
And do you think someone should make a social experiment like that, where they move a couple of third world people into a very nice village and see what happens?
Well, I'm sorry to say that we've kind of been doing that.
No, it is.
Well, I mean,
it's all coming true.
I'm sorry. I don't want to go full like downer here, but we have. I mean, we have seen, like, for instance, I hate to bring this example up, Zimbabwe and Rhodesia. To the Rhodesian, there were a large population of white people living in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, and they all got kicked out. And the white areas now look a lot more like the black areas, and they don't have the culture of the white Rhodesians. They just look identical to the black areas.
Well, but we're basically talking about racists here that kicked out the white people.
No, I don't racism. That just sort of, whether they're racist against whites or racist against blacks, it's not.
Who kicked out the white people?
Pardon me?
who kicked out the white people? Was it?
That's not the point. Isn't who kicked the white people out. The question is, if you take a city and replace the population culturally, will it look like the same city? And we see from numerous examples that it doesn't.
Yeah, but it's not like it's gonna happen like that. It's not gonna be replaced instantly. It's gonna be replaced step by step, and it's gonna take generations for these people to even become the majority if they ever do. And
Well,
who
no, I
knows
mean
if they will, because
the Africans in Zimbabwe are the majority. They're the only people there now.
oh yeah, no, I mean we're talking about in this case one of our cities being affected by mass immigration. I would think it would still only be about 10% at the most at the
London,
start.
London, London is London like a majority Muslim right now, and that was less than one generation. I lived in London area as a child, and it was mainly English.
Is it really majority Muslim now?
It's majority non-English. I forget if it's a majority Muslim, but it's a
Well, that's
majority. It's a
different.
majority non. I feel like we're quibbling over details here. If in
I'm
if in if
sorry, I
in
may be
20 if
very
in 20
nitpicky.
years it can go from being a majority native population to a majority non-native population, then I think the point is made that this can happen very, very quickly.
Well, I guess it is possible that they could just take over the whole city, and then they would all be very different than they are now. I don't know how the culture is there now, but I guess you may have a point that it's going to get worse every generation.
Look, no, I'm not saying it's going to get worse every generation. Technology always goes up, and so there's always an element of improvement. But what I am saying is that technology isn't the only issue. It's not the only input in a civilization. Another input is culture, and that's what we're sort of missing here. If we worked on refining a productive culture, that would that would really address what most people's problems are with society right now. I would stipulate.
All right, so then we've got religion being the main driving force of culture here, along with the art that is now not as fine as you would like it anymore, and that's the main problems then
Well, I mean,
with the culture disappearing.
it's a problem that I talk a lot about, certainly.
Well, I see your point, but it's still hard to to think how to get into religion, and if it's going to be worse getting into religion. Is it going to save culture? But you already don't like how religion is becoming more secular. So is religion even going to be the way to save the culture if the religion is also changing very very progressively?
I think that the mainstay of the religious right now are Orthodox. I think that I think that the progressive churches are a dying force ultimately, and that what will emerge from this is that the natural tendency of religions to be themselves will kind of come to the head. I think progressive Islam will die, and I think progressive Christianity will die. I wouldn't build my civilization on the assumption that either progressive Islam or progressive Christianity are going to stick around for a very long time. It will be Orthodox Christianity versus Orthodox Islam and Orthodox Judaism.
And how can you tell that this religious culture is not going to be detrimental to progressive to the progress of technology and the economy? Because you've got these countries in America that are flyover states, and they're religious, aren't they?
I mean, it might be detrimental. Oh, I
And
mean,
then,
what state are you talking about? I mean,
well, the
with the
Rust
exception of
Belt.
Utah, with the exception of Utah, very few of these center states in America have a highly religiously practicing population. Most of the difference comes from self-identification.
Well, but isn't that a big part of it? Isn't
Not
identification
in
the
my
first
book.
step to religiosity?
Well, it's the first step, but it's a meaningless one. I only care about whether people practice their religion. I don't care about whether they profess it. That's sort of like this is the whole like liberal or progressive Christianity or progressive Islam thing. I think you actually have to practice your religion in order for it to be impact on your life, and I think the stats bear that out to a certain degree.
So you don't think that in California you have less practicing Christians than in the Rust Belt?
Oh, well, I don't know. We could measure that. I mean, certainly you'd have less practicing religious people than in Utah as per capita.
Well, I
If you
mean,
were to compare them to some place like,
percentually.
if you were to compare them to some place like, you know, Ohio, like maybe not, right? Like a lot of those Appalachian areas, they're very de-churched themselves.
But so you got this fear that these new cultures are going to be detrimental, but then you also have the possibility that the old church is going to be detrimental for advancements. So is it even going to be worthwhile having the church in that case? Well,
Well,
I guess I know the answer.
I don't know about this. The the thing is that whether it's detrimental to have the church or not, Orthodox religion is going to come back just demographically, purely through demographics. It will come back. Now that can be a purely Islamic surge, or it can be other religions also sharing in this upswing. Now the question is it going to be detrimental to technology? It might have some detrimental effects, but it's not going to be. It's going to have some good effects, and one of the good effects is it's going to have. This is going to have is it's going to sort of hopefully push back against some of the cultural decline that we've seen in the last 20 years. I personally don't believe that there's any evidence that religion, qua religion, detracts from technology. I think that if you look in history, it's actually quite the opposite.
But what about creationists? They believe that there's a problem with science because of evolution, because it contradicts the Bible. But does it even contradict the Bible? You could still think that God
Well,
created the earth through evolution, but they just
you just
outright
answered
deny
your
it.
you answered your own question there,
Well, no,
right?
they still deny evolution, even though it's not a clear contradiction. It might be.
I mean, this is sort of like the bugaboo that like you get from atheists a lot. This like Musk's day creation thing. Like, I
I'm
just
sorry.
no, it's fine. But I want like I've been hearing. I've been like in this atheist theist circuit for a long time, and it's always the same thing since like 2001. It's always been, but Christians deny evolution. But Christians deny evolution. I mean,
Well, don't
some
they?
Christian,
I have
some
talked to Christians that deny evolution.
and I've talked to Christians that don't believe in evolution either. But you know, I'm sorry to sort of go here, but if you're watching a broader philosophical argument, you'll realize that ideologies have difficult times with scientific theories generally, and this is that that there might be some biological theories that well progressives and secular liberals have a very difficult time with as well.
I guess I never thought about that. I guess it's possible there's some atheists that also don't that actually don't believe in some kind of spirituality instead of
Well, I'm talking
science.
about atheists that don't believe in certain biological realities.
Oh, yeah, we
I
can
meant
have
atheists that
those.
believe that there's no biological difference. There's no non-superficial difference between men and women.
Yeah, I
Like,
guess that is pretty silly.
but this is a common belief in our universities.
How is
Common
it?
belief. Oh yeah, common belief in our universities.
Well, the thing is that I don't really put much stake into universities anymore. In my opinion, everyone can just go on the internet and they can learn literally everything that they want to. And it, universities, they're very ideological, apparently. I don't
Well, that's
see.
funny because you might say that, but the employers put stake in universities. And I've got a super chat here that says the gentleman, and I think he's referring to Gamesquid or Florian, the gentleman needs to address whether he is using his atheism to create a non-religious state or he is arguing for his own philosophy. This is from Tabooish Productions. So if I can interpret Tabooish, I think he's just asking, well, what are you advocating for in terms of
I
atheism?
guess that is a fair point. Well, I guess would you say that you're a culture warrior?
Pardon me. Yes, I'm certainly a culture warrior. That's
Well,
my primary. That's my primary fight.
I
My
think
primary fight is the culture war.
I think I'm mostly a culture pacifist then.
Very good. Very good.
I think that we should just not worry too much about these things, and there's no way to prove God, in my opinion, but also no way to disprove God. And I think there's not that much point in thinking about it. And well, as I said, you can go to the market for everything. You can go on the internet and pay money for education there, or you could even get it for free if you're willing to put up with advertisements. And the fact that you have to pay, the fact that you have to go to the university to get a higher wage, it is true because the university, let's just say it's a big shit test. If you go to the university, it means you can endure nonsense. And that's what you're looking for in an employee. So it makes sense, but you can still go to university without getting indoctrinated. I went to Catholic Church and I'm not indoctrinated into Catholicism. So
if the Catholic Church ran its indoctrination like modern third wave feminists ran their indoctrination in universities, the United States would be the most religiously devout country since the Reformation.
Well, maybe that, or maybe they would just have a really rebellious youth that goes on the internet and posts about atheism, makes little games about Isaac.
I'm not going to speculate here. One of the pet peeves I have with Christian education is them not learning the lessons from progressives about how this has to be disseminated. But I'm sorry, I kind of cut you off. And please continue. So you basically think
it's just fine.
I mean, I get the sense from you that you think that sort of all this cultural stuff is you just want technology to improve, essentially.
Well, what I would like would be a libertarian utopia, but I think that would be selfish. So I think the status quo is fine. That's basically my concept. The status quo is fine.
Why do you think people are so dissatisfied? I mean, I'm dissatisfied with the status quo. Why do you think people are so dissatisfied with the status quo?
Well, they gotta be dissatisfied. If they would agree on something, that's when we'd have to be worried. The people on the left think it's a patriarchy. The people on the right think it's a social justice warrior utopia. And the truth is probably just that it's all fine, and we have to worry once there's a problem big enough that everyone can agree on it. That's when we'd have to worry about it.
Uh-huh.
I guess I'm a big centrist in that way, but I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I'm devaluing your culture war here. But
don't worry about it. Like I know I have a job, I have my own life beyond the culture war online. And, maybe things will all work out. I think, to my read on the situation, we've bought into a lot of things that are... I mean, first of all, people are not immediately happy right now. I think people feel very alienated. Like, not even like looking ahead into the future. I'm talking about people feel very alienated with society as it exists right now. They don't feel like they're part of anything larger than themselves. So leaving aside my... dark prognostications about the financial and cultural system of this country, I think that you have to deal with that alienation because it's part of the status quo in a way that it wasn't in previous eras.
Well, the question is, does a better life equal happiness? Does a happy life improve your inner happiness perfectly? And also, are you going to be envious of people who have an even better life? I think it's only... I don't know if pure happiness is the thing that we should be striving for. I guess we haven't gotten into objective morality yet. The question is, if you have objective morality as a system of mass, as you describe it, which I would consider to be similar to the subjective morality, what's the variable that you solve for? Is it reproduction that you solve for? Is it productivity, or is it human happiness? Which is the most important thing that morality should strive for?
In an ultimate sense, it has to be God. But
Oh,
God
just God.
contains,
But what does God
well,
want?
what God is, what secular people, what religious people call God, secular people call truth, goodness, and beauty. And it can't just be happiness. It has to be striving towards something larger than ourselves.
Well, well, there you go. So it doesn't have to be happiness. So the fact that they're dissatisfied, maybe it just gives them a reason to work harder. But I guess I'm being optimistic here again.
No, I think it's good to be optimistic. I think that I want people to explore more radical ideas. I think that
I can agree with that. I liked your series about the alt right very much. It was very interesting how you talked about it as if their concepts were true.
yeah, I think that sort of gets into a place where you have more it gets you past the always like nitpicking over certain elements of people's positions to just grant their factual premises. But what I'm hoping people will do is I'm hoping people will sort of radically experiment. I think that the alt right, or not the alt right, the dissident right, that sort of hopefully is forming on YouTube. I think it's the new counterculture, and I think that inside counterculture, I'm hoping to see sort of the same art that you guys have been producing in the indie game industry emerging. Because I think that it would be really interesting to see a video game or a movie with the same sort of radical critique that the Binding of Isaac brings towards religion, bring a similar radical critique to modern society. I think that would be a very interesting direction to go with culture and art. Frankly, I
Oh,
think it's something that a lot of it's sort of lacking in modern art. I mean, I go to modern art galleries, or I look at modern what we would call SJW production stuff, and there's no rebellion, there's no anger. It's all complacency.
well, the anger is towards the right in that case, don't you think?
Oh yeah, the anger is towards the right, but there's no anger towards the broader society they live on, and that's the image of the modern progressive. It's the
Well,
person who's
there's a little anger.
totally at home in this consumeristic society, with the one exception that they're angry at Donald Trump and the right wing, and other than that, they're totally fine with this sort of deracinated existence we live, where we're disconnected from everything else. I mean, that's the modern progressive in a nutshell.
Oh yeah, so what would this game be called? Is it called the Culture War? Would you have Anita Sarkeesian as a playable character, and she can do a spin attack and slice people to death with her hoop earrings? And then you have to fight the final boss, and it's Donald Trump.
It would be about a mother who tries to sacrifice her son because she's afraid that he embodies toxic masculinity.
Yep, it's just a reskin of Isaac. That's every game is just a reskin of Isaac. Perfect.
Okay, actually, man, I enjoyed talking to you, but I actually have to get to work. So, did anyone want to have like 5 minutes or so where we could just sort of wrap it up? Maybe we could take questions from the chat.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, but again, like I'm trying to shove this into the period I have before I have to take off for work.
No problem. I know you're busy. Well, another thing I just wanted to say. Right now, I'm working on a game that's basically a roguelike. That's like the genre of Binding of Isaac, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have any of the political satire or anything. It's just a city, and it's invaded by alien squids that try to shoot it down. And I wonder if that's gonna be much worse than a game that has political opinions. What do you think?
Maybe alien squids are analogy for the migrant crisis.
Perfect. Yep, that's gonna be it.
And their leader, Angela Squircle. But sorry. Please, censors on YouTube and Facebook, do not target this channel. It was just a joke. Although I live in a country with the First Amendment, so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, you're lucky. There's real bad laws about free speech here. You can get arrested for just Facebook posts.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine in America, but it is a reality for people tuning in from Europe.
It doesn't even make sense because you could potentially just accidentally say something offensive and then you'd be in trouble.
But that's the point, though, right? The point is to make people afraid to have certain thoughts.
I don't know if that was the point when they added that to the Constitution, that there should never be Nazis again. I don't know if that was their point to make everyone fear. But I guess it could be. It just, I feel that that's one of the traditions that we should probably get rid of and have it so that everyone can say what they want. But I guess that would definitely be something that's very controversial around here.
So we have Micah Curtis. Get me on Twitter so we can sit and have a chat. I think he's talking to me. Gamesquid loved Binding of Isaac. God bless Deus Volt. So thanks, Micah. We have to have a chat.
I actually watched Micah as well. That's pretty cool that he plays it as well.
I thought Binding of Isaac was a pretty cool game. I haven't played video games in a really long time, but I love the art house stuff. The art house stuff is really cool. That's definitely the direction gaming is going. So I hope you won't mind me saying Godspeed to you in your production of new art house games, even though I don't like the AAA stuff.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. So Endeavor says, Distributist, why do mainline Protestant churches keep going SJW even though they lose attendance by doing so? Excellent question. The reason why they keep on going social justice warrior is because the leaders are inside a culture that pressures them to become more and more progressive. And so when they interact with people at a leadership level, or when you interact with people, in some sense, I interact with this class a little bit because I live in a big city. You're constantly pressured to move in a progressive direction. And you're going to come up with excuses to move in that progressive direction psychologically. So I had a video series called Resisting Progressive Institutions. And if you're in a progressive environment, you're naturally going to kind of move in a progressive direction subconsciously. And so that accounts for it a little bit. And I think one of the reasons I've noticed sort of a difference between Protestant and Catholic reactions to progressivism is that Protestants tend to go full SJW really quickly, or they tend to like hard resist it and then suddenly turn to atheism and discard all of it. Whereas what Catholics tend to do is they tend to do what's called in previous years, they tend to synchronize it. So you'll have like Orthodox Catholics who will at the same time try to be Orthodox progressives, and they'll try to fit the two puzzle pieces together even though they don't fit. But to answer the question, I think it's generally a tendency that's brought about by peer groups. Sorry to take that long answer. You still there, Gamesquid?
Oh, I'm still there. I was just not sure because you said Godspeed. I wasn't sure if I was still welcome to respond to things.
Oh no, we're going for a few more minutes. I just we're just answering questions.
Oh, but I wanted to say it's just very refreshing that the Christians are not offended by the Binding of Isaac, and it's good that people don't get offended at art, which is not something you could expect from the left, maybe, but I might be wrong. Might be having a small bias here towards the right.
So Neverender says here's for $5 says here's point not 5 Bitcoin. You need to have a vetting process. This is like watching a squirrel thrown into a wood chipper. Cringe, but you can't look away. Maybe that was It was fine. I think that maybe what I'll eventually do is I will have sort of a main channel that's dedicated to sort of interactions with other YouTubers, and then I'll have more of a shoot the breeze live stream channel the way that Braving Ruin does. I think that part of being, I mean, I guys, I think we should be really charitable to Gamesquid. I mean, he's a game designer. He's not really familiar with how this part of YouTube works. And I think he's done a really good job nonetheless. And I think that part of having a good YouTube channel is having people on that from a variety of different perspectives. And part of that, like this can be working out sort of a large difference in how we see the world. So
Um, well, I'm not sure. It seems that your audience has this mindset that you're owning people here. I've seen your interview with Christy Winters, and it was like people were saying that she got completely crushed. But what I took away from that was that you guys just agreed to disagree. But I suppose I might be
no,
more charitable here than I should be.
no, I think that when you come to a large ideological divide, what it eventually ends up being is that we point out where our different ideas are, right? Like, so I had a conversation with like this, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like a National Socialist guy,
Oh
and
wow!
he had this idea that like this is definitely going to get banned, but I'm talking about someone else's ideas. He had this idea that like Jews were like condemned as a people to hell and to be evil for all eternity. And I just said, like, that's totally heretical. I don't believe it. And these are the reasons why I don't believe it. And we should just, like, that's fine. Like, you believe that, I don't, and we'll just have to end it here. Right. Sometimes you just have to end with, okay, these are our irreconcilable differences. And, we have to just understand those are our differences and announce them for the audience and then sort of end the conversation. And I think that with people who like me and Christy Winters or me and this Nazi guy or whatever, the most you can do is point out where your ideological systems diverge and then treat that as honestly as possible, because I don't want to relitigate Jewish conspiracy theories over and over and over again. It's and at some point we just have to say, like between me and you, I don't think it's as broad as necessarily that disagreement, but we have to say like, okay, well, you believe more in the market and technology, and I'm more skeptical. I believe more in culture and heritage, and that's just where we differ, right?
Oh yeah, we have some disagreements, but I think it's mostly about God. I guess I'm not even completely opposed to the culture changes, except for the strict belief in God. I think the family would be valuable, even though I have somewhat of a dysfunctional family, where there's a big struggle about inheritance right now. But I guess
Mm.
in average, having family would be a good idea. But I just like I just really like how you're handling it, where you're having conversations with all kinds of people. It's kind of like what Sargon does, but you got your own kind of brand of doing that, and it's very neat. And I wish I could be someone who's great in debates, but I've only recently stopped being incredibly shy, and I'm now trying to become a YouTuber who is just liked and also knows how to make good points. But I'm on a very bumpy road, and who knows if I'll ever succeed.
I think
And
you'll succeed eventually. I think that it's just a process of learning how to do this and rolling with the punches. I mean, like people give you aggressive feedback all the time. You just have to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
oh yeah, I know how to deal with feedback. It's just well, I guess maybe I don't. No, I know how to deal with feedback with games, but I'm insecure about my ability to speak, which is fair because I didn't do it for that long, and English isn't even my native language. But I guess you're right. I should definitely just focus on improving, and knowing your weaknesses is also knowing your strengths and knowing where to improve. So
I mean, you're
I'm
doing
not
a great job right now.
well, thank you. I know there were some awkward moments, but I think I'm getting there. I think I've done well. It's just I've like taken notes about what I was going to talk about, and then I guess I talked about most of them, but I did this with a lot of preparation. I don't know how well I could have done without any preparation. Here you are, just getting out of bed and got all your worldviews in a row.
Oh, I had the help of Mr. Caffeine over the course of this conversation. Oh, I have one last super chat. I hope this is the last one. Neurograph for $2 says demo art/game during the talk. Well, I would certainly like to see that, but I think everyone should just go over to Gamesquid's channel for his gaming work. You know, that would be probably pretty cool. Wait, are you a storyboard designer or an art person or a
I'm
programmer?
actually a programmer. I guess I should have mentioned this because I'm not the guy who came up with the idea of Binding of Isaac. I'm just the guy who did the programming, and it
Mhm.
was a two-man job to make this game. And well, Edmund, he did a lot of work, that's for sure. He made the concept of the game, and he promoted it. He was already famous from Super Meat Boy and Gish, and I looked up to him when I was young, and I still look up to him. And it was great that I got to work with him. But I guess he wants me to think that Binding of Isaac is partly my game, but he's definitely got a bigger part in my book. But anyways,
I think a lot of people are looking to get into the industry of producing content like games. I mean,
well, it
I
is
think I know
very.
a few people who aspire to be game designers, and
Oh, it's very difficult, and
I know it's a crowded
if
industry.
you're not a programmer, it's going to be even more difficult. Apparently, there's all kinds of games that Edmund knows the creators of, and they didn't do as well as the Binding of Isaac did, not by a long shot. And who knows if their careers will ever pan out. I like to be positive about the chances, but it is a very large market now. It keeps getting harder and harder. It was very easy to get in previously, but now there's so many indie developers. It's possibly hard to get noticed. I still have to wait until I actually release my latest game to see how it really is for me. But then again, I'm already partially famous, so I might have a boost here. Anyways, I haven't talked about my new game yet on my main channel, but I got like a small programming channel where you can see me program it if you're into that. But I'm still waiting for this big trailer that I'm gonna make and gonna announce the game, and it's gonna come out on early access, and it's gonna be really huge. And I hope you guys will be around there to see it if anyone comes.
Well,
But
well, yeah, I have to run. Everyone, check out GameSquid's channel, and apparently my mods just dropped a super chat in. I have to get going, guys.
oh
Tell
no.
GameSquid he did a good job for his level of involvement in this part of the internet, and I will certainly say that, GameSquid. I think that everyone has a hard time with this part of the internet the first time you step in. Please continue to be part of the conversation, and thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
I
hope I'm not gonna be the next Jontron or anything.
I don't even know what John Trump was famous for before he got famous for screwing up in a debate against Destiny. But anyway, yeah, was he a game guy or something?
He made really well edited Let's Plays, and then well he got really popular, and then he secluded himself from the internet for a while, and then he came out as someone who may have less savory opinions than others. I hope that's not going to happen to me. Oh well.
Well, anyway, I think I like the idea of ending it on the note of Godspeed. So I'll end this conversation like Razor Fist by telling GameSquid and Florian, thank you for coming on, and God fucking speed.
Godspeed.